That dog knows when the school bell rings better than I do. It was the first thing out of Principal Henderson's mouth that frosty Tuesday morning, and it silenced the break room like a slap to the table. Mrs. Lutz, the second-grade teacher with her ever-clinking charm bracelet, looked up from her coffee. Coach Denny stopped mid-bite into his half-toasted bagel. Even Miss Carver, the newest hire, paused at the copy machine. Everyone turned to the window. And there he was again. A medium-sized mutt, brown with black ears and a patchy tail, standing right by the flagpole like he owned the place. He wasn't menacing. He didn't bark. He didn't beg. He just stood there, tail wagging in a slow rhythm, his eyes scanning the front doors of Alder Creek Elementary like he was waiting for someone. "It's been 10 days, muttered Coach Denny. 10 days in a row." 11, corrected Mrs. Lutz, ever the stickler. "He started coming last Monday, the day after the snowstorm." Principal Henderson crossed his arms and frowned. "And no one's claimed him?" "We posted him on the community board." "Nothing," said Miss Carver. "No collar either, just that little blue bandana around his neck." "Kids are getting too attached," Henderson said. "Saw one of the first graders trying to feed him a peanut butter sandwich yesterday." "That was my student," Mrs. Lutz sighed. "Jamie Keller. He said the dog looked lonely." "He does," said Miss Carver softly. "We can't have a stray hanging around every day," Henderson continued. "What if a parent complains? What if a kid gets bitten? Liability nightmares." "But he hasn't caused any trouble," said Mrs. Lutz. "Just sits out there all day, follows the kids to the gate. Sometimes he even watches recess." "It's like he thinks he belongs here," added Miss Carver. Henderson looked again out the window. The dog was now sitting, eyes fixed on the double doors as the morning bell rang and the first wave of kids poured in. Not a single bark, just a quiet, calm presence. "Still," Henderson muttered, "I'll call animal control if he keeps this up." But he didn't. And the dog came back the next day, and the next, and the day after that. It became something of a morning ritual. Students would whisper excitedly on the bus. "Is he here today? Do you think he remembers us?" Some started calling him Patch because of the mark on his tail. Others preferred Rusty because his fur glinted a reddish hue when the morning sun hit it right. By the second week, someone had left a plastic bowl of water by the flagpole. No one admitted to it, but it was always full. By the third week, Patch, as the name eventually stuck, had a blanket under the tree. And by the fourth week, he started walking the perimeter of the playground during lunch. Not running, not chasing, just walking, watching. Occasionally pausing when a ball rolled toward him or when a little hand reached out to touch his head. He never flinched, never growled, never ran. It was Jamie Keller who got the first tail wag. He was a quiet boy, first grade, shy, glasses too big for his nose and a permanent stain of chocolate milk on his cuffs. Jamie had trouble making friends. He liked drawing spaceships and reading books about volcanoes. Recess was a time for him to sit by the fence and watch the others run. But that day, Patch walked right up to him and sat. Just sat. Jamie held out a crust of bread from his sandwich. Patch sniffed, took it gently, and wagged his tail once. It changed everything. From then on, Jamie made it a point to sit outside near the same tree, and every time Patch would come and sit beside him. "They're like old friends," said Miss Carver one day, watching from the window. "Or maybe Jamie's the first friend Patch has ever had." "Dogs are smarter than we think," murmured Mrs. Lutz. Henderson tried to ignore it, tried to pretend it wasn't happening. But deep down, even he began to soften. There was something about Patch, about the way he showed up, always the same spot, same time, never causing a fuss, never intruding. And then came the Friday that changed everything. It started like any other day. Frost on the ground, kids bundled in coats and mittens, Patch at his usual post, tail thumping softly. But something was off. He didn't sit. He paced. He paced back and forth near the kindergarten doors, whined softly, looked anxious. Miss Carver noticed it first, then Coach Denny. Then the office phone rang. It was the bus driver. "We're missing one," he said. Jamie Keller didn't get on. I waited, I honked, but no sign of him. Mrs. Lutz immediately started calling Jamie's home. No answer. His mom had left early for work, like usual. That's when Patch took off, right past the flagpole, past the teachers, down the sidewalk. A blur of brown and black fur disappearing down the road. "What in the world?" began Henderson. "We have to follow him," said Miss Carver. "I think he knows where Jamie is." Coach Denny and Mrs. Lutz didn't hesitate. Miss Carver grabbed her coat. Henderson followed, still protesting, but moving. They ran. 3 blocks down, a left turn, past the park, past the church, across the road. Patch never stopped. He ran with purpose, eyes forward, nose to the air, and then he turned sharply into a narrow alley beside the hardware store. There was Jamie, curled against the wall, clutching his knees, tears frozen on his cheeks. "He got scared," Mrs. Lutz whispered. "He thought he left his backpack on the bus. Got off and tried to run back. Must have gotten lost." Patch was already beside him, nuzzling his arm, licking his face. Jamie clung to the dog like he was made of light. They brought him back, safe and sound. The school nurse checked him over. Just cold and scared. Nothing serious. Jamie didn't stop hugging Patch the whole time. Principal Henderson didn't say much that day, but the next morning, Patch had a new tag around his neck. Property of Alder Creek Elementary. It wasn't official, of course, but no one questioned it. The school secretary took it upon herself to make sure his water bowl was cleaned daily. The PTA organized a fundraiser to get him proper food and vet checkups. Jamie made a cardboard sign for the hallway that read, "Patch's Corner," right where the dog usually lay during recess. The janitor even built a small wooden shelter beside the playground tree. The dog had become part of the school, and yet, he remained a mystery. No one ever claimed him. No flyers. No microchip. No missing dog reports that matched his description. It was like he had simply appeared, just when someone needed him. As the weeks went on, Patch became more than a mascot. He became a companion, a morning greeter, a lunch companion, a listening ear during after-school tears. Students whispered secrets to him. Teachers found comfort in his quiet company. Even Henderson, ever the rule enforcer, found himself sitting beside him during lunch, absent-mindedly scratching behind his ears. One chilly March afternoon, as a spring wind teased the branches and kids shrieked with joy over a surprise early dismissal, Patch stood by the gate, as always. Jamie came out last, backpack nearly dragging on the ground, glasses crooked. He walked up to the dog and without a word, leaned his forehead to Patch's. "Thank you," he whispered. Patch licked his cheek. Neither of them noticed Principal Henderson standing at the door, watching. The man smiled. "That dog," he said to himself. He might just be the best thing that ever happened to this place. But the story was far from over. By the time April settled in with longer afternoons and birdsong in the hedges, Patch had become as much a fixture of Alder Creek Elementary as the squeaky front door or the wonky swing near the second tree in the playground. He had his own spot during morning announcements, lying near the base of the front steps, tail twitching as Principal Henderson recited the Pledge of Allegiance with the fifth graders. He'd tilt his head whenever the bell rang, as though keeping time with the school's rhythm. No one remembered exactly when Patch started attending assemblies, but there he was, every time, settled at the edge of the gym, in his quiet corner near the bleachers, calmly watching like a proud chaperone. When the band played their spring concert, he rested his chin on his paws, tail thumping along to the beat of the drums. When Miss Carver's class performed their play about the rainforest, he watched from start to finish without once shifting his weight. "Has anyone trained him?" Mrs. Lutz had asked one afternoon in the teacher's lounge. "Nope," said Coach Denny, "but I swear, he knows the lunch schedule better than the cafeteria staff." The students were the first to notice how Patch's behavior changed throughout the day. In the mornings, he patrolled the drop-off area, greeting kids as they hopped out of cars. During lessons, he'd nap quietly outside the windows, soaking up the sun or sitting upright like a sentry. At lunchtime, he walked beside the children to the tables under the awning, making sure no one got left behind. But what made Patch even more remarkable was what he seemed to know. It started with Lily Hart. Lily was in 3rd grade, tall for her age with strawberry blonde hair and a blue backpack covered in stickers. Her parents were going through a bitter separation, and though she rarely spoke about it, her quiet demeanor had grown quieter. She kept to herself, her once bright laugh muffled beneath a cautious smile. One cloudy Monday, after a morning math quiz, she was sitting alone on the edge of the playground, arms wrapped around her knees. No one noticed. Except Patch. He trotted over, lay beside her, and nudged her elbow until she looked up. What happened next would become school legend. Lily buried her face in his fur and began to cry. Not loudly, not with sobs, just quiet, shaking tears that hadn't had room to fall until that moment. Patch didn't move. He let her stay like that until the bell rang. Only then did he nudge her to her feet with a gentle nose to her back. When she walked back inside, her steps were steadier. Word got around. "Patch knows when you're sad," whispered Eli Morrison to his brother. "He just does." Some didn't believe it, until they saw it themselves. Patch would sit beside a student who had a rough morning. He'd place himself between kids arguing over a ball until they cooled down. If someone tripped on the blacktop, he'd be there in seconds. "It's like having a counselor on 4 legs," Miss Carver said one afternoon as she stood with Mrs. Lutz, watching Patch gently lead a new student named Noah toward the lunch tables. Noah had transferred from a different school mid-semester. He barely spoke, eyes down, hands in his sleeves. But when Patch nudged his backpack and sat patiently beside him, the boy cracked the smallest smile. From that day on, Noah always saved half of his apple for Patch. Meanwhile, Jamie Keller remained Patch's closest friend. They were inseparable. Every morning, Patch would wait by the bus stop 5 minutes before Jamie arrived, walking him all the way to the school doors like a parent might. They shared sandwiches, stories, even books. "Can dogs read?" Jamie once asked, during quiet reading time. "Because he always looks at the pages with me." Mrs. Lutz didn't answer. She just smiled and handed him another bookmark. One morning, the school hosted a community open house. Parents came in droves, walking the halls with coffee cups and name tags, peeking into classrooms and admiring crayon portraits on the walls. Henderson stood at the front doors greeting visitors with practiced warmth. And beside him? Patch, of course. "I think more parents are greeting the dog than the principal," muttered Coach Denny. "That's because Patch isn't trying to recruit PTA volunteers," Henderson replied with a dry smile. A little girl, too young to be a student yet, toddled up and wrapped her arms around Patch's neck. He let her, tail wagging, ears perked. Her mother apologized profusely, but Henderson just waved it off. "Honestly, he's probably the safest greeter we've got." Later that week, Miss Carver noticed something new. During recess, Patch had taken to watching the forest edge. Behind the school grounds, just beyond the soccer field and past the broken chain-link fence, there was a strip of trees, thin and tall, mostly pine and ash. The kids weren't allowed past the fence. It had been there for decades, rusting quietly, separating the school from a slope that led down to the creek. Patch would sit by that fence now and then, ears stiff, eyes trained on the trees. "Looking for squirrels?" asked Jamie one afternoon. But Patch didn't chase, didn't bark, just watched. Mrs. Lutz brought it up at the next staff meeting. "Maybe there's a coyote trail," Coach Denny offered. "They roam through these parts." "Or maybe he's remembering something," said Miss Carver. "Something from before." Silence followed her words. No one really spoke about Patch's past. It was easier to pretend he'd always been here, that he belonged entirely to Alder Creek. But the truth was, he had a life before them, before the flagpole, before the sandwich crusts and homemade signs. Jamie tried not to think about it. One rainy Friday, he stayed late after school. His mom was stuck at work, and the bus had already left. Mrs. Lutz let him sit in her room, drawing spaceships on the whiteboard while she graded papers. Patch waited outside. It was pouring. Sheets of cold spring rain slapped against the windows. The playground had become a shallow lake. Yet there was Patch, huddled under the awning, watching the hallway door. "Let him in," Jamie pleaded. Mrs. Lutz hesitated. But then she stood, walked to the door, and held it open. Patch trotted in, shook himself once, and sat beside Jamie without hesitation. "See?" Jamie grinned. "He's clean. Well, mostly." "Only this once," Mrs. Lutz said, sitting back down. They sat together until the rain stopped. When Jamie's mom finally arrived, wind-blown and breathless, she looked down at the dog and blinked. "Who's this?" "This is Patch," Jamie said proudly. "He's my best friend." His mom opened her mouth, closed it, then nodded. "Nice to meet you, Patch." As April turned to May, the school began preparing for summer. Bulletin boards came down. Art projects were sent home in folders stuffed too full to close. The end-of-year field trip was planned, and Patch was even included in the permission slips. "Can Patch ride the bus?" Jamie asked eagerly.
"No pets on school buses," Henderson said automatically. "He's not a pet," replied Jamie. "He's school staff." That got a laugh, even from Henderson. But plans changed when the buses arrived that Friday and Patch refused to board. He stood at the bottom step, tail still, eyes firm. "Guess that answers that," said Coach Denny. So Patch stayed behind. When the students returned, muddy and exhilarated from their trip to the nature reserve, Patch was waiting by the gate, tail wagging, like always. And then, on the last Monday of the school year, everything shifted. It started quietly. Patch didn't greet the morning buses. He wasn't by the flagpole, not at the recess fence, not under the awning, not in his usual corner by the gym. He was gone. Jamie searched everywhere. He checked the library steps, the back sidewalk, even under the porch near the janitor's shed. Nothing. By lunch, the entire school knew. "Maybe he's just sick," said Lily. "Maybe he had to go home," said Noah. "Maybe someone took him," whispered another child, wide-eyed. Henderson called the local shelters. Nothing. Mrs. Lutz phoned the vet that had seen him once during a PTA-sponsored checkup. Nothing. For the first time in months, the playground felt hollow. Jamie sat alone under the tree, his sandwich untouched. By dismissal, the mood was somber. No one said it aloud, but the ache was real. That night, Jamie couldn't sleep. He sat by his bedroom window, watching the street. At one point, he even crept outside in his slippers, flashlight in hand, whispering Patch's name into the wind. Nothing. When Tuesday came, Jamie dragged his feet through the school gates. His friends barely spoke. Even Henderson seemed unusually quiet. But as the morning bell rang, a rustle stirred near the edge of the woods. Jamie saw it first. A flash of brown, a familiar patch of black. Patch emerged from the trees, limping slightly but steady. His fur was damp, his blue bandana torn, but his eyes were bright. Jamie shouted, ran. Patch trotted forward, tail wagging faster than ever, and leaped into his arms. Teachers came running, students cheered. Even Henderson looked misty-eyed. No one knew where he had gone, no one could say why. But he was back, and whatever had taken him away, it hadn't kept him for long. That day, Jamie refused to leave Patch's side. He stayed beside him during class, curled next to him during recess, even asked to stay after school to keep him company. Henderson didn't object. Because that day, everyone remembered why Patch mattered. He wasn't just a dog. He was family. And family, no matter how far they wander, always finds their way home. The last week of school rolled in with the warmth of early June, bringing sticky mornings, sun-warmed grass, and the hum of anticipation that always came before summer vacation. Kids grew restless in their seats, tapping pencils and sneaking looks out the windows. Teachers grew tired in a different way, juggling end-of-year checklists, packing boxes, and fielding questions about what day exactly was the last day and whether or not there would still be pizza on Friday. Through it all, Patch remained a steady presence. If anything, his brief disappearance the week before had deepened everyone's appreciation for him. He hadn't gone far, it turned out. Mrs. Lutz discovered that he had gotten his paw stuck in a gap between two fallen logs near the creek bed behind the woods. It must have taken hours to free himself, and somehow he had limped back to the forest to rest instead of coming straight to the school. The vet had come again, checked his leg, and said it was just a strain. He'd be fine. But the whole ordeal left the students buzzing. He went on an adventure, Jamie declared with wide eyes. He had to save something, maybe a squirrel or a turtle. Or maybe, Lily added thoughtfully, he just needed a break, like us. Every morning that week, a small crowd gathered around Patch the moment the buses pulled up. It was like greeting a celebrity. Some brought scraps from home, chicken nuggets, hard-boiled eggs, carrot sticks, even though everyone had been reminded not to feed him too much. Someone from the PTA knitted him a new blue bandana. Jamie picked out the thread color. Patch seemed content with the attention. He accepted every pat, every scratch behind the ears, with calm patience. But more than anything, he stayed close to Jamie, as though the week apart had created an invisible tether they were both eager not to stretch again. One afternoon, the school librarian, Mrs. Eldridge, came outside with a stack of books. She was retiring that year, and her shelves were already half empty. As she shuffled toward the parking lot, Patch got up and followed her, slow and quiet. "Oh, don't mind me," she said to the dog. "Just going to drop these off at the donation center." Patch trotted beside her until she reached her car. "You are such a gentleman," she chuckled, rubbing his head.
Later, when the students asked why he went with her, Jamie had an answer right away. He knew she needed company. That idea stuck with them. It was comforting, in a way no adult explanation ever was, and it seemed true, because the next morning, Patch was there again at the flagpole, waiting like nothing had changed. But something had changed. It was small at first, barely noticeable. Patch started moving slower. He still walked Jamie to class, but he didn't follow him around at recess as often. He spent more time lying in the grass, his tail wagging just once or twice instead of in steady loops. He stopped chasing butterflies in the field like he used to. "Maybe he's just tired," said Coach Denny, crouching next to him one afternoon. All the excitement catching up to him. "Or he's sad we're leaving for summer," Jamie said. "Dogs can get sad too." The idea that Patch would be alone over the summer left a strange ache in the kids' chests. At recess, they sat in a circle around him and made promises. "I'll visit you every Tuesday. My mom works nearby. I'm going to bring you my old beach towel so you have something to lie on. What if we make him a calendar? Then he can count the days until school starts again." Even Principal Henderson, overhearing this from the office window, felt the tug of something hard to name. He brought Patch a slice of leftover meatloaf from his lunchbox that day, just set it on a plate beside him, and sat on the front steps, watching the clouds pass. "You've done good work this year, you know," he muttered. "Better than most of us." Patch didn't answer, of course, but he rested his head against the principal's shoe. The second to last day of school, a storm rolled in just after noon. Black clouds stacked over the hills, thunder rumbling so low it vibrated the windows. The final assembly was moved inside, and the students filed into the gym in clusters, their excitement subdued by the gloom. Patch stayed near the entrance. The storm worsened. Rain hit the roof in heavy sheets, wind shrieking through the flagpoles. The lights flickered twice, and then, with a loud crack and a long blink, the power went out. Kids gasped. A few screamed. Teachers raised their voices over the din, calming everyone, guiding them back to their rows. Patch barked. Not a loud bark, not aggressive, but firm, sharp. A sound no one had heard from him before. Everyone paused. Patch moved toward the far doors of the gym, then stopped, looked back, barked again. Jamie stood. "He wants us to follow him." "Jamie, sit down," Mrs. Lutz called gently. But Jamie didn't sit. He moved toward the door, his classmates watching with wide eyes. One by one, others began to follow. Hesitantly, slowly. A ripple of movement. And then came the smell. Smoke. Not much. Faint, but real. The lights were still off, the backup generator slow to kick in. But the air had changed. Someone opened the side door. Smoke curled inward. Henderson didn't hesitate. "Everyone out, right now. Move to the parking lot, just like we practiced." Chaos didn't erupt, not entirely. The students moved in lines, teachers guiding them. It wasn't panic, not yet. But the wind had picked up. The air buzzed. Patch led the way. By the time the fire trucks arrived, the source had been identified. A small electrical fire near the storage room behind the gym. Contained quickly. No real damage, but it could have been worse. And Patch had known. The local paper ran a story the next day. "School dog helps prevent fire disaster." There was a photo of Patch in front of the fire truck, tongue lolling, tail wagging, Jamie's hand resting on his back. The whole town knew his name after that. People who had never set foot on the school grounds came by just to meet him. Someone left a bag of treats on the front steps with a card that read, "Thank you, hero." Patch didn't act any different. He just curled up in the sun and watched the last day of school unfold. Students signed yearbooks, teachers handed out final grades, lockers slammed for the last time. By afternoon, most of the rooms were half empty. Jamie sat on the front steps beside Patch, holding his yearbook in one hand, a peanut butter sandwich in the other. "I'm going to miss you," he said softly. Patch lifted his head and leaned it against Jamie's side. "You should come live with us," Jamie added. "I asked my mom. She said she'd think about it." Patch didn't move. Jamie looked at the playground. It felt strange, already missing something that hadn't ended yet. "I'll be back in August. That's only like 2 months. It'll go fast." But when it was time to go, when the buses pulled up and kids called out to each other from windows, Patch didn't follow. He stayed on the steps, watching. Jamie leaned out the window. "I'll be back, okay? Promise." Patch watched the bus until it disappeared around the corner. That evening, the school grounds felt quiet, still. The air held that late summer heat that clings even after the sun goes down. The janitor, Mr. Howard, locked the doors and paused beside Patch. "You know they'll all be back," he said. "You could go too, just for a bit." Patch yawned, laid his head back down. The town slept, and Patch stayed. He stayed the whole summer. Neighbors reported seeing him walk the perimeter of the fence every morning, like clockwork. He lay in the shade by the flagpole, wandered into town sometimes, but never far. Someone said he walked a child home from summer camp one day. Another said he spent an afternoon lying near the town square during a music festival. But every evening he returned to the school. Sometimes he lay on the front steps, other times near the playground. He didn't bark, didn't whine, just waited. The school board met in July to discuss the start of the next academic year. At the end of the meeting, someone raised a hand. "What about the dog?" There were a few chuckles, a few nods. "Well," Henderson said, "he seems committed to the job." They voted to officially adopt Patch as a school companion animal. He wouldn't go inside classrooms, not regularly. But he'd have his spot, his food, his care covered. A few parents volunteered to rotate summer feeding duties. The vet agreed to make regular visits. When August came, the teachers returned. Patch was already there. Jamie came bounding up the sidewalk on the first day of school, his new shoes squeaking with every step. "I missed you so much," he said, throwing his arms around the dog's neck. Patch nuzzled into him. And then the bell rang, and Patch, tail high, walked alongside him to the door like he always had. The air was still warm when September came, but there was a different kind of energy in the halls of Alder Creek Elementary. The buzz of a new school year had settled in, and so had the understanding that Patch was here to stay. There had been no announcement, no big event to mark his official status, but no one needed it. The children already considered him staff. The teachers consulted him like an old friend. The school nurse even added his name to the daily sign-in sheet, right above hers. His schedule was more predictable now. He made his rounds with remarkable punctuality. He met the first bus, followed Jamie to class, wandered the hallways during second period, and took his usual nap by the tree during lunch. If a student cried in the nurse's office, Patch seemed to know before anyone called. If a teacher had a stressful day, Patch somehow ended up near their classroom door, waiting quietly. On a cool Thursday morning, during the second week of classes, Patch did something new. He wandered into the art room. Mrs. Bloom, the art teacher, was in the middle of explaining self-portraits when she heard the click of nails on the tile floor. The room fell silent. Patch walked in, tail low and wagging. He didn't disturb anything, didn't sniff around or bark. He simply walked over to the corner of the room and laid down, curling into a ball near the supply cart. "Well," said Mrs. Bloom after a moment, "I suppose we have a visiting artist today." The students giggled, then got back to work. One girl, Clara, quietly turned her paper and began sketching Patch instead of her own face. By the end of class, half the students had done the same. Mrs. Bloom didn't stop them. That afternoon, the hallway outside the art room was decorated with dog drawings. Crayon, pencil, watercolor. Some looked like actual portraits. Others were just happy scribbles. All of them had a place on the wall. When Jamie saw them, his face lit up. "He's famous," he said. "He always was," said Miss Carver. And yet, fame didn't change Patch. He remained humble in the way dogs are, unbothered by praise, moved only by kindness. He still spent time with Jamie during lunch, still nudged Lily's hand when she seemed lost in thought, still walked slowly beside little Charlie, the kindergartner with braces on his legs, every morning from the gate to the classroom. Then came the fall festival. It was a big deal every year. Parents volunteered. The playground transformed with hay bales and games. There was a pie-eating contest, a pumpkin toss, and a raffle with prizes donated by local businesses. Teachers ran booths, and students got to wear their Halloween costumes early. This year, Jamie had an idea. "Can Patch be in the costume parade?" Principal Henderson raised an eyebrow. "He doesn't even like wearing that bandana." "But we don't have to put anything on him," Jamie said quickly. "He can just walk beside me, like my costume partner." "And what are you dressing as?" Jamie grinned. "A forest ranger." It was settled. The parade wound around the playground and through the front parking lot, where parents gathered with cameras. Kids strutted in everything from homemade robots to princess gowns. When Jamie came around the corner, dressed in green with a cardboard badge pinned to his shirt and a wide hat too big for his head, Patch trotted beside him. The applause was louder than for any other entry. Mrs. Lutz took a photo. It ended up on the school's bulletin board under the title, "Best Duo." Later that evening, when the festival was winding down and the sun was slipping behind the trees, Jamie and his mom stood near the pie table, Patch sitting quietly between them. "You know," she said, brushing crumbs from her shirt, "you two have been through a lot together." Jamie nodded. "He always knows when something's wrong, even when I don't. Some people go their whole lives without that kind of friend." "I don't know what I'd do without him," Jamie said. She looked at the dog, then at her son. "Well, I guess it's a good thing he doesn't plan on going anywhere." But even the most dependable things have surprises. On the Monday after the festival, Patch didn't show up to greet the first bus. The students noticed immediately. "Maybe he's sleeping in," one said. "He never misses Monday," said another. Jamie tried not to panic, but his fingers twisted the straps of his backpack so tightly that his knuckles turned white. The teachers looked around. Miss Carver checked the parking lot. Coach Denny did a lap around the field. Mrs. Lutz even walked to the edge of the woods. Nothing. "He'll be back," someone said. But the day passed without Patch. That night, Jamie and his mom drove around town. They checked the park, the church steps, the alley behind the grocery store. Jamie even walked part of the trail behind the school, calling out until his throat hurt. Still nothing. He barely slept. By Tuesday afternoon, the students had started writing missing dog signs. They used pictures from the festival, drew red hearts in the corners, and handed them out to parents at pickup. A few were taped to lampposts. Jamie even mailed one to the local radio station. But Wednesday came and went, and the ache settled deeper. Mrs. Lutz tried to distract Jamie with new reading games. Miss Carver gave him extra time during art. Even Henderson, trying to be subtle, slipped him an extra granola bar at lunch. Nothing helped. Then Thursday morning, just after the second bell, Patch returned. He walked through the front gate like he had every right to, his fur damp with dew, a small burr stuck to his leg, and a tired look in his eyes. But he was there. Jamie spotted him first. He didn't shout or run. He just walked up to Patch, crouched down, and wrapped his arms around him. "Where did you go, Soots?" he whispered. Patch leaned into him, eyes closing. Jamie didn't ask again. Mrs. Lutz called the vet later that day. He came by after lunch and checked Patch over while the students watched from the windows. No injuries, no illness, just tired. Maybe he needed to see something for himself, the vet said. Dogs do that sometimes. They go off to think. About what? Jamie asked. Whatever they carry. After that, Patch was quieter. Still present. Still gentle. But slower. Like he was saving his energy. Some days he stayed curled up in the shade for hours. Other days he didn't come at all, but then showed up the next morning like nothing had happened. The students began to understand. Even the youngest ones. "He's old," Lily said softly one afternoon. "I think he just gets tired." "We should make him a place to rest," Jamie said. So they did. They cleared a space near the tree he liked best, spread out an old quilt from the lost and found, brought a soft toy from the first-grade classroom that no one claimed. Someone donated a small dog bed, and another parent added a waterproof canopy just in case it rained. They called it Patch's Place. He seemed to like it. When he lay there, the kids came by in small groups, not crowding, not shouting, just sitting quietly. Sometimes reading, sometimes drawing, sometimes just thinking. Jamie sat there every day. One afternoon, as the wind scattered dry leaves across the blacktop, Jamie brought a journal from home. He opened it beside Patch and started writing. "I'm going to keep track of all our memories," he said. "All the things you did, so I don't forget." Patch licked his hand. That night, Jamie wrote about the first tail wag, the sandwich crusts, the art class, the fire, the parade. He titled the journal, Patch Days. And every evening after that, no matter how tired he was or how much homework he had, he wrote one thing Patch had done that day. It became his favorite part of the day. Even when Patch didn't come, he wrote something. "Patch took a break today, probably watching the stars. Patch didn't walk me to class this morning, but I saw him through the window near the office. He was watching the flag." Patch laid by the tree and listened to Lily read. I think he liked the story. As October deepened, the air grew colder. Jackets replaced sweatshirts. The trees behind the fence turned gold and crimson, and Patch kept his place. Always quiet, always steady. Until one morning, something changed again. Patch stood near the gate like usual, but when the buses arrived, he didn't move. He didn't wag. He didn't walk Jamie to the door. He just stood, still and silent, and then he turned and walked toward the woods. Jamie ran after him. "Patch, where are you going?" But the dog didn't look back. He disappeared behind the trees. Jamie waited. 10 minutes. Then 20, nothing. He returned to class, his chest heavy, the back of his throat tight. All day he checked the window. All day, the tree near Patch's place stayed empty. And that night, Jamie opened his journal and wrote, "Patch went somewhere today. I don't know why. I hope he comes back. But if he doesn't tomorrow, I'll still write something. That way he knows I'm waiting." He fell asleep with the journal on his chest. Outside, the leaves whispered in the wind, and the school lights dimmed with the setting sun. But Patch didn't return. The next morning arrived gray and cold. The sky hung low and colorless, the air heavy with the smell of damp leaves and the distant scent of wood smoke. The grass on the field was wet with dew, the flag at half-mast for a former teacher who had passed away the week before, and there was a hush over Alder Creek Elementary that hadn't been there in a long time. Patch didn't come back. Jamie waited at the gate until the very last second before the bell rang. He scanned the woods, the sidewalk, the street corners where he and his mom had driven that summer when Patch had disappeared for those few days. But this time, there was no movement, no shape among the trees, no quiet steps behind him. Miss Carver gave him a gentle smile when he walked into class. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. Everyone knew. And even though no one said it out loud, everyone could feel it. The school felt wrong without him. Jamie spent recess alone under the tree, the quilt still in place, the small plush toy damp with morning mist. He didn't cry, not right away. He just sat and listened to the wind in the leaves and the distant squeal of the younger kids playing on the swings. Mrs. Lutz brought him a cup of hot chocolate after lunch and sat beside him. "You know," she said gently, "when I was a little girl, my cat disappeared for 5 whole days. We searched everywhere. Then one day, I opened the back door, and there he was, waiting like he'd just come in from the mailbox." Jamie stared at the woods. "But Patch isn't a cat. Patch is Patch." "Yes, he is," she said. "And Patch has always done things his own way." For the rest of the week, the kids watched the gate every morning. Jamie kept writing in his journal, 1 line each night. Friday. "Still waiting. Maybe Patch is waiting for something too." Saturday. "I had a dream that Patch was lying in the field under the stars. He looked peaceful." Sunday. "I left some chicken near the tree. It was gone when I checked later, but I don't know if it was him." By the time Monday came, it had been 7 days. The school counselor, Ms. Hampton, invited Jamie to talk after lunch. He came in with his backpack, journal clutched under one arm. She handed him a pack of peanut butter crackers, the same kind he always used to share with Patch. "Do you want to talk about it?" she asked. He shook his head. "Do you want to write instead?" He opened his journal. She watched him as he scribbled, his pencil moving quickly. She didn't ask to see what he wrote, but when he looked up at her, there was something more settled in his eyes. "I think he went to help someone," Jamie said finally. "Just like he helped us." "Maybe he did," she replied. That afternoon, Principal Henderson made an announcement over the intercom. "Good afternoon, everyone. Before we pack up for the day, I want to say a few words. As some of you may have noticed, our very good friend Patch hasn't been around this past week. We don't know exactly where he's gone, but we're hopeful that he'll return soon. In the meantime, I'd like to remind you all that just because something or someone isn't here doesn't mean they've stopped being important. Patch has given this school more than we ever expected, and he hasn't been forgotten. There was a pause. If anyone would like to write something about Patch, or draw a picture, or share a story, Miss Carver has placed a big box outside her classroom. We'll hang everything on the main bulletin board. That way, whenever Patch does come back, he'll see how much he means to us. Jamie smiled at that. Not a big smile, but a real one. By the end of the week, the board outside Miss Carver's room was full. There were colorful letters, poems, photos from the fall festival, and so many drawings. Some of them were simple crayon outlines. Others were detailed portraits. One student had built a small model of Patch out of modeling clay. Jamie wrote a letter. "Dear Patch, I hope you're helping someone else. But if you can, please come back soon. It's not the same here without you. I keep your blanket clean and your place ready. Love, Jamie." The teachers noticed how the school shifted. The noise level was quieter. The students, though still active, had a kind of gentle edge to them. It was like they were all waiting for something, and in that waiting, they were kinder, more thoughtful, more aware of one another. Then, on a Wednesday morning in late October, the phone rang in the front office. It was the police department. A dog matching Patch's description had been spotted near the old rail station across town. Animal control was dispatched, but by the time they arrived, he was gone. The tracks ran all the way through the woods behind Alder Creek. It was possible he'd made his way back. Jamie heard the news from Miss Carver. "He was close," she said. "Then I think he's coming back," Jamie replied. That afternoon, Jamie asked his mom if he could walk a little farther before school. "Not too far," she said. "Just stay where there are houses, and wear your hat." He bundled up and left 10 minutes early. He walked past the normal school sidewalk, crossed the park, and paused near the edge of the trailhead leading toward the rail line. He didn't go in. He just waited. The wind rustled through the branches, carrying the sharp scent of pine and the soft trill of birds. Then he heard it. A faint sound. Footsteps? No. Something softer. A shuffle. A pant. A familiar click of claws on stone. He turned. Patch stood at the tree line. He looked thinner, a bit dusty, but his eyes were bright, and his tail moved once, then again. Jamie didn't say anything. He just knelt. Patch walked forward and rested his head on Jamie's shoulder. Jamie held him for a long time. When they arrived at school, hand in fur, everything stopped. Teachers paused mid-lesson. Students pressed against windows. The librarian cried. No one cheered. No one shouted. Instead, they came out quietly, one by one, to greet him. Patch sat by the tree, and the entire school sat around him like it was story time. Jamie pulled out his journal. "Patch is back," he wrote. "He came home." No one asked where he had gone. Patch didn't act any different. He resumed his routine the next day. He walked the halls, sat beside the kindergartners, napped in the sun. But everyone was more careful now, more grateful. They brought him treats wrapped in paper towels, drew new pictures, refluffed his blanket daily. Halloween came, and Jamie dressed up as a vet. Patch walked beside him, wearing a tiny bandage on one leg made from gauze and a ribbon. They won the most heartwarming prize. The next week, the school secretary started printing little notes for Patch. "You are brave. Thank you for staying. We love you." They were tucked into a small envelope taped near his corner. Patch never tried to read them, but he sniffed the paper each time a new one appeared. As the days grew shorter and the trees lost their color, Jamie noticed Patch resting more. He didn't follow the kids all the way to the bus anymore. He'd stop near the stairs and watch. Jamie didn't ask why. He just started sitting with him longer each day. One night, Jamie wrote, "You don't have to do anything. You've already done enough. I'll walk you home if you need me to." The next morning, Patch followed Jamie to the tree, lay down, and didn't get up all morning. Mrs. Lutz brought out a thermos of warm broth. Jamie poured a little into a dish. Patch drank it slowly. It was the quietest day the school had seen all year. And even though he didn't run, didn't patrol, didn't greet every single student, Patch was there, watching, listening. And that was enough. The last full week of October settled over Alder Creek Elementary like a heavy blanket. The trees stood nearly bare, their limbs creaking in the cold wind, and the sky hovered in that constant shade of pewter that made afternoons feel like dusk. Kids still laughed and ran, but their voices came softer, and their steps seemed to slow when they passed the old tree near the back of the playground. That was where Patch lay most days now, his breathing even, his eyes half closed, watching but unmoving. He didn't follow the kids anymore. He didn't get up to walk Jamie to class or meet the buses. He'd raise his head when Jamie arrived, and his tail would sweep the blanket once, but that was it. Jamie had stopped expecting more. He just sat with him now, every day, before and after school, his backpack leaning against the tree trunk, his fingers buried in Patch's fur. "Mom says we're going to visit my uncle in Ohio for Thanksgiving," Jamie said one morning. "I wish you could come, but it's a long drive. And you hate the car." Patch blinked slowly. "I'll bring you something back," Jamie promised. "Some turkey, maybe a soft piece of bread. You'd like that." Miss Carver began holding quiet drawing sessions for the younger students near Patch's place. She brought out clipboards and colored pencils and let them sketch him from a distance. They were gentle. They didn't crowd. Even the kindergartners seemed to know that Patch needed quiet now. The school janitor, Mr. Howard, built a small wooden sign and planted it near the base of the tree. It read, "Patch's Place." Below that, in smaller letters, "Friend to all." Mrs. Bloom, the art teacher, laminated dozens of drawings and strung them along the fence like a gallery. The pictures fluttered in the wind, a trail of bright color on gray days. By Halloween, it was clear to everyone that Patch wasn't going to be the same again. He still ate, still drank water, but slower, more carefully. And when the kids came near, he'd shift his head to look at them, but not lift it. Principal Henderson, who rarely showed emotion, came out every afternoon and sat beside Patch with a thermos of coffee and a sandwich. Sometimes he spoke, sometimes he didn't. One afternoon, he simply reached into his coat and pulled out a biscuit. "Used to save these from lunch when I was in school," he said. "Figured you earned it." Patch accepted it gently. That night, Jamie stayed up late again, writing. Today I held Patch's paw. It was cold, but he let me. I think he liked it. He kept looking at me. Not in a sad way, just like he wanted me to know something. I wish I knew what. That weekend, Jamie and his mom went to the craft store. They bought a small weatherproof notebook, some yarn, a handful of plastic sleeves. On Monday morning, Jamie brought them to school and set up a new box beside the tree. On the front was a sign in big block letters, Patch's Guest Book. Students took turns writing messages. Some drew hearts. Some just wrote their names. Thanks for watching us. You're my hero. I'll bring you my snack tomorrow. You're better than Cheetos anyway. Lily wrote, You make school feel like home. Every page filled up. By Friday, they were on their third notebook. That afternoon, just as the wind started to pick up and dry leaves spiraled across the blacktop, Jamie noticed something strange. Patch wasn't under the tree. Jamie's heart jumped. He dropped his backpack and ran around the playground. No Patch. He checked the front steps, the side entrance, the hallway near the art room. Nothing. He was about to run to the woods when he heard a shout. Jamie? It was Mrs. Lutz, waving from across the field. Come here, he's okay. Jamie sprinted toward her. Behind her, near the corner of the school building where the sun hit in the late afternoon, Patch was sitting, not lying. Sitting. Upright. Tail thumping slowly. Jamie froze. Is he better? Mrs. Lutz shook her head gently. No, but I think he wanted to be where he could see everything today. Jamie walked over slowly. Patch looked at him and gave a soft huff, like a sigh. Jamie sat beside him. They stayed that way until the last bell rang. Over the weekend, the temperature dropped. The school got its first frost of the season. The grass turned stiff, and the morning breath of every student turned to fog. Patch didn't show up Monday. Jamie waited. Again. This time, he didn't panic. He just sat under the tree for a long while, reading from his journal. He read aloud. Remember when you stole Lily's mittens and buried them in the sandbox? She pretended to be mad, but I think she liked it. Remember when you caught that plastic bag flying through the playground and everyone thought you were a superhero? The wind picked up. Jamie kept reading. The next day, Patch came back. He was slower than before. Every step looked like it took effort. But he made it to the tree, curled up on the quilt, and laid his head down. He didn't move for the rest of the day, but his eyes stayed open. He watched the children, watched Jamie, watched the flags. And when Jamie sat beside him, Patch nudged his arm with his nose. That was the last time he moved. Wednesday came, and Patch didn't return. Thursday passed. Friday. Jamie kept going to the tree. He added a new drawing each day. He read from the guest book. He straightened the blanket. And then, on the first Monday of November, Principal Henderson called a short assembly. Not in the gym, just outside, by the tree. All the students gathered. Teachers stood behind them, scarves wrapped tight, eyes red. Jamie stood in the front. Henderson cleared his throat. I want to thank everyone for coming out here this morning. As you all know, our friend Patch hasn't been with us these past few days. We've done everything we could to find him. We know he's not in pain. We know he had people who loved him. And we know he gave this school something we could never repay. He paused. We don't know exactly what Patch's story was before he found us. But what matters is what he gave us while he was here. He was more than a school dog. He was a companion, a guardian, a reminder that kindness doesn't need words. There was silence. Not heavy, just soft. Respectful. Jamie stepped forward. He held up his journal. "I wrote something," he said. "Just a few pages." He opened to the first page. Patch showed up one morning like he belonged here, and after a while he did. He made us feel safe. He sat with us when we were sad. He watched the halls. He helped when we were scared. He didn't do tricks. He didn't ask for anything. He just stayed. And sometimes, that's the bravest thing someone can do. He looked out at his classmates. "I don't know where he is now, but I think he's watching us, still helping. And I think we should do what he did. Be there for each other." Lily stepped up and handed him a drawing. It was Patch, surrounded by stars. They pinned it to the tree. One by one, the students began leaving small tokens. A mitten, a shoelace, a peanut butter cracker. The school didn't say Patch was gone. No one used the word. But they knew, and somehow, knowing didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a part of the story. Jamie kept writing. He added a second journal. Patch would have liked how quiet the playground is in the morning. The frost makes everything glitter. It's like he's still walking through it. I don't look behind me as much, but I still feel like he's there. The teachers noticed something too. The kids looked out for each other more. They helped zip jackets, shared snacks, picked up dropped pencils without being asked. And whenever a new student arrived, the class would guide them to the tree. "This is Patch's place," they'd say. "You'll want to sit here sometimes." Winter crept in slowly that year. Snow came late, but the cold held on. Patch's place remained untouched. Even on the snowiest days, someone always cleared the blanket. The quilt was switched for a waterproof cushion, and Jamie brought a thermos of broth once a week. "Just in case," he whispered. On the last page of his journal that December, he wrote, "It's almost Christmas. There's lights on the school now. You always liked the way they sparkled on the windows. I hope wherever you are, there's stars and grass and someone who needs you. But just so you know, we still need you too." And somewhere behind the trees, the wind moved gently, like a tail wagging, and Jamie smiled. Winter at Alder Creek Elementary unfolded with a certain stillness, the kind of stillness that lives in snowdrifts and long shadows, in breath that fogs the air and boots that crunch quietly along the sidewalk. The mornings were darker now, and for the first time in years, the space beside the flagpole remained empty. But Patch's place, tucked under the old tree at the edge of the playground, never went unnoticed. The students continued their quiet rituals. Jamie, now in 3rd grade and taller than he'd been when Patch first arrived, brought fresh blankets when the snow soaked through. Miss Carver laminated more artwork, stringing them tighter this time so the winter wind wouldn't carry them away. A local parent donated a small solar light that glowed softly in the evenings, casting a circle of warmth over the little shelter. The adults didn't say much about it anymore, but the students carried the weight gently, without fear, without drama. They simply understood. Patch had left them something, and it was theirs to keep going. Jamie kept writing. Each night he filled a page or two in his new journal, now labeled with a sticker that read, Volume 2. He didn't always write about Patch. Sometimes he wrote about school, or how his mom let him make pancakes on Sunday, or how the snow made the swing chains cold enough to bite his fingers. But Patch found his way into most entries, whether directly or not. January brought snowstorms that canceled school twice. On those days, Jamie built a small snow dog in his yard, shaping the ears carefully, sculpting the snout just so. His mom stood at the kitchen window, and watched him pack snow with mittens too large for his hands. He stepped inside afterward, red-cheeked and quiet. "You okay, bud?" Jamie nodded. He liked snow. Remember how he used to roll in it, right by the second slide? She smiled. "I do." Back at school, the fifth graders started organizing a patch project. It had begun with a single idea from Lily, who had sat down one morning in the library and drawn a poster. What would Patch do? Underneath, she wrote in neat block letters: kindness, quietness, looking out for others. She taped it to the door of her classroom. Within a week, similar posters appeared all over the building. One outside the cafeteria: share your snack, even if it's your favorite. One in the hallway: sit with someone who's alone. You don't need words. Even the kindergartners got involved. Miss Jacobs helped them trace their hands onto colored paper and write small promises on each one. I won't push. I will help clean up. I will listen. They taped the hands around Patch's place, a blooming circle of color around the tree. Jamie watched it grow each day. He didn't talk about it much, but he kept adding things of his own. A page from his journal, a drawing of Patch looking up at the stars, a single mitten he no longer needed. As February neared, Mrs. Lutz announced a school-wide writing contest. The theme was "Someone Who Changed My Life." Jamie didn't hesitate. He wrote his piece in one night. 3 pages, simple words, no dramatic flourishes. He titled it, "My Friend Who Didn't Speak." When he handed it in, she read it twice before setting it aside. Not because she wasn't impressed, but because she didn't want to cry in front of the other students. The judges chose 3 winners. Jamie was among them. He was asked to read his entry during the February assembly. The gym was full. Parents were invited. Local news showed up. The microphones squeaked once before settling. Jamie stepped onto the small wooden stage and opened his notebook. "I'm not very good at talking in front of people," he began, "but I think Patch wouldn't mind if I was nervous." Some of the younger kids giggled. Patch was a dog, but he wasn't just a dog. He knew things. He didn't talk, but he heard everything. And when he looked at you, it felt like you didn't have to explain anything at all. He paused. "I think that's the kind of friend I want to be. Someone who just stays, who helps by being there." He closed the notebook. That's it. The applause was soft at first, then grew. Not loud, not wild, just warm, grateful. Afterward, a mother from another class knelt beside Jamie near the bleachers. "I never met Patch," she said, "but I wish I had." Jamie smiled. "He probably would have sat next to you without asking. That's just what he did." In March, the ground thawed early. Patches of grass peeked through the snow, and the air took on that smell of wet earth and soft promise. The students grew more restless, running harder during recess, shedding coats before it was warm enough. Patch's place remained untouched. The blanket had faded, the drawings now crisp from the cold, but it remained their space. Jamie and Lily took to sitting there most mornings. Sometimes Noah joined. Other times, little Charlie from the lower grade, who now walked steadily without help from the older kids, curled up there with a book. One morning, Miss Carver found the 3 of them sitting in a row, silent, watching the birds in the nearby tree. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Waiting," Jamie said. She didn't ask for what. Later that day, she brought out a small notebook and wrote her own entry. Today the playground was quiet. and beautiful, and I thought, maybe this is how Patch taught us to listen. By mid-March, something unexpected happened. A dog appeared at the edge of the fence. It was smaller than Patch, all white, a little skinny. Its ears were too big for its head, and it watched the playground with nervous eyes. Jamie was the first to notice. He didn't approach. He just watched. The next day, the dog came closer. This time, more kids saw. "Is that Patch's puppy?" someone whispered. "No," Jamie said, "but I think it needs something." He placed a small bowl of water near the fence. The dog didn't approach until recess was over. Then, slowly, it crept forward and drank. By Friday, it sat just beyond the fence, still and silent. Lily drew a picture of it and hung it next to the others. Miss Carver suggested they name it. "Not yet," Jamie said. "Let's wait and see what it wants. Names come after." Over the next week, the dog got braver. It approached the tree, sat near the blanket, still didn't let anyone touch it. But it didn't run either. Jamie kept bringing water, a few crackers. Once he left a scarf. The dog pulled it closer with its teeth and rested its head on it. Then, one morning, the dog was gone. Gone for 3 days. When it came back, it had a limp, mud on its fur, and something in its mouth, a stick. It dropped it near the tree and sat down. Jamie crouched near it, not too close. "Okay," he whispered. "Maybe you're ready now." The dog didn't move, just watched him. Jamie picked up the stick. "You want to play?" He tossed it gently. The dog didn't chase it, but it looked at the stick, then at him, then stood up and took a step forward. Jamie sat still. The dog stopped 2 feet away, then 1, then nudged Jamie's knee with its nose. Jamie didn't move. After a moment, the dog sat and stayed. Lily came over. So did Charlie. The dog looked at them but didn't move away. By lunch, the whole school knew. The next morning, the dog was still there. Jamie wrote in his journal, "Something is changing. It doesn't feel like the end. It feels like something new. Not a replacement. Not a redo, just something else. Something Patch might have sent." And as the sun rose over Alder Creek Elementary, casting light across the budding grass and the tree that had come to mean so much, the little white dog curled up beside the blanket and closed its eyes. It didn't need a name yet. It only needed to be there. And that was enough for now. The little white dog didn't leave. Not after that morning. Not after that stick. Not after that quiet, careful exchange of trust. He stayed near the tree, curled up beside the blanket where Patch used to sleep, lifting his head whenever the students came out for recess. At first, everyone kept their distance. No one wanted to scare him off. But soon, it became clear he wasn't going anywhere. He didn't bark. He didn't whine. He just watched. Blinking slowly as the children moved around him, growing bolder day by day. Jamie came every morning. He no longer brought crackers or sticks or food, just himself and the quiet patience Patch had taught him. He'd sit nearby, journal in hand, and speak in a low, steady voice, reading sometimes, remembering others. "I think he likes stories," Jamie said one day, looking up at Lily. "Like Patch did." Lily nodded, kneeling beside him. Maybe he came here for one. The dog didn't flinch when she reached out her hand. He sniffed her fingers and rested his chin on his paws. It was spring again, and the world around Alder Creek Elementary was blooming. The flowers by the cafeteria windows pushed through the mulch. The swing chains creaked with warmth. The track behind the school dried enough for Coach Denny to restart morning walks. Through it all, the little white dog remained. Quiet, gentle, present. Still, no one named him. It wasn't because they didn't want to. Kids whispered suggestions in class. Snowy, marshmallow, ghost, comet. But no name ever stuck. Even Jamie didn't try. Not out loud. Then, on a cool Wednesday morning, Jamie brought a box to school. Inside were items Patch had loved. An old rubber ball, the scarf he used to sleep on, a printed photo from the fall festival. There was also something new. A collar. Not fancy. Just a soft gray strap with no tag. Nothing written. Just a collar. He placed it beside the dog and sat back. The dog looked at it, then looked at Jamie. Jamie said nothing. After a long moment, the dog nudged the box, pushed his nose under the scarf, and pulled it close. "Okay," Jamie whispered. "I think you're ready." He reached forward, slowly, carefully, and lifted the collar. He waited. The dog didn't move. With steady hands, Jamie fastened it around his neck. The dog blinked. Jamie smiled. "You don't need a name yet. Not until you tell us. But this means you're one of us now." The next day, a letter came from the district office. Someone had seen a photo on the local school board page and asked if the new dog had an owner. They included a photo, a smaller version of the white dog, barely a puppy, curled in the back of a crate. Principal Henderson looked at the picture, then out the window at the dog lying in the sun. He picked up the phone. By the following Monday, the truth came out. The dog had once been part of a litter rescued from a hoarding situation across the county. All but 2 of the dogs were adopted. One had run away before it could be placed. The shelter never found him. Until now. Jamie read the letter twice, then a third time. "Does this mean we have to give him back?" he asked. Henderson shook his head. "They say he's officially unclaimed, and since he's come here on his own, the district says it's our decision." Jamie turned to the dog, who was chewing softly on a branch under the tree. He smiled. "I think we already know his answer." That week, the school voted. It wasn't formal. No ballots, no rules, just slips of paper in a jar. "If you could give him a name, what would it be?" the prompt read. By Friday, the jar was full. Jamie and the 5th graders sorted through them in the library. There were dozens of ideas, some silly, some sweet, some clearly inspired by snacks. But one name came up more than any other: Hope. Not just because of what the dog was, but because of what he had become. Hope, the one who came after Patch. Hope, the one who chose to stay. That Monday, Jamie walked out to the tree with a small engraved tag in his hand. It had been donated by a parent who owned the hardware store. He crouched beside the dog, Hope now, and gently fastened the tag onto the collar. The dog didn't flinch. He leaned forward and nudged Jamie's arm. "Thanks," Jamie whispered. He didn't cry, but he felt something swell in his chest, something light, something full. That spring, Hope began to follow a new routine. He greeted the buses again, not every day, not like Patch had, but often enough that the students began to expect him. He sat through reading circles. He followed Miss Carver during her outdoor art classes. He even let little Charlie rest his head on his side during recess. And he started walking Jamie to class. It wasn't the same as before. It wasn't meant to be. But it mattered. On the last day of school, Jamie brought in a small photo album. It was filled with pictures from the past 2 years. Patch under the tree, the fall festival, the fire drill, Hope's first appearance, the guest book entries, the signs the kids had made. He gave it to the library. Mrs. Eldridge, just weeks from her final retirement day, placed it on a shelf near the checkout desk with a simple label, "The Story of Our Dogs." Hope lay beneath the desk as she did it. That afternoon, the kids gathered under the tree one last time. Some brought flowers, others brought jokes. One brought a kazoo. Hope sat calmly, tail swishing. Not excited, not anxious, just there. Jamie stood. We started this year wondering if anything would feel the same without Patch. The group was quiet. And it didn't. Not exactly. It felt different. But it still felt like something. Like we were carrying him forward. He looked down at Hope. And now we get to carry Hope too. That summer, the school stayed open for a few days of community events. Reading programs, garden cleanup, the occasional movie night. Hope never left. Parents brought their kids by just to say hello. Even teachers who weren't on summer duty came with iced coffees and quiet afternoons spent under the tree. When August returned and the new school year began, Hope stood at the gate. He watched the buses arrive. He walked beside Jamie to the doors. He waited by the art room. The tree still bore the sign, Patch's Place. Below it, a new plaque had been added, and Hope came next. That fall, a new student joined the 3rd grade. Her name was May. She had glasses too big for her nose and a nervous way of standing, like she was always about to move but never quite did. On her first day, she sat alone during recess, until Hope walked over and lay beside her. She didn't smile right away, but her shoulders relaxed. Jamie watched from the swings. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Later, he opened his newest journal, Volume 3. He wrote, "She looked scared, but Hope went to her first, just like Patch would have. That's how I know we're going to be okay." And they were.